slowly as she had in Memphir's temple. Then she stepped towards the captive. Within her hood a beaded line of moisture outlined her lips. A pulse thundered on her temple. This was a fearsome thing to try. She held the sun on a line with one of the wristbands. She must avoid the flesh it imprisoned, for Asti's power could kill. From the sun there shot an orange-red beam to strike full upon the metal. A thin line of red crept across the smooth hoop, crept and widened. Varta raised her hand, sending the sun spinning up, and Lur's claws pulled on the metal. It broke like rotten wood in his grasp. The girl gave a little gasp of half-terrified delight. Then the old legends were true. As Asti's priestess, she controlled powers too great to guess. Swiftly she loosed the other hoops, and restored the sun and worlds to their place over her head as the captive slumped across the threshold of his cell. Tugging and straining, they brought him out of the broken ship into the sunlight of Urb. Varta threw back her hood and breathed deeply of the air which was not manufactured by the wizardry of the lizard skin, and Lur sat panting, his nostril flaps open. It was he who spied the spring on the mountainside above, a spring of water uncontaminated by the strange life of the lake. They both dragged themselves there to drink deeply. Varta returned to the lake shore reluctantly. Within her heart she believed that the man that they had brought from the ship was truly dead. Lur might hold out the promise of the flowers, but this was a man, and he had lain in the water for countless ages. So she went with lagging steps to find Lur busy. He had solved the mystery of the spacesuit and had stripped it from the unknown. Now his clawed paw rested lightly on the bared chest, and he turned to Varta eagerly. "There is life." Hardly daring to believe that, she dropped down beside Lur and touched their prize. Lur was right. The flesh was warm, and she had caught the faint rhythm of shallow breath. Half remembering old tales, she put her hands on the arch of the lower ribs and began to aid that rhythm. The breaths were deeper. Then the man half turned. His arm moved. Varta and Lur drew back. For the first time the girl probed gently the sleeping mind before her, even as she had read the minds of those few of Memphir who had ascended to the temple precincts in the last days. Much of what she read now was confused, or so alien to Urb that it had no meaning for her. But she saw a great city, plunged into flaming death in an instant, and felt the horror and remorse of the man at her feet because of his own part in that act, the horror and remorse which had led him to open rebellion and so to his imprisonment. There was a last dark and frightening memory of a door closing on light and hope. The spaceman moaned softly, and hunched his shoulders as if he struggled vainly to tear loose from bonds. "He thinks that he is still prisoner," observed Lur. "For him life begins at the very point it ended, even as it did for the Turby flowers. See, now he awakens." The eyelids rose slowly, as if the man hated to see what he must look upon. Then, as he sighted Varta and Lur, his eyes went wide. He pulled himself up and looked dazedly around, striking out wildly with his fists. Catching sight of the clumsy suit Lur had taken from him, he pulled at it, looking at the two before him as if he feared some attack. Varta turned to Lur for help. She might read minds and use the wordless speech of Lur, but his people knew of the art of such communication long before the first priest of Asti had stumbled upon their secret. Let Lur now quiet this outlander. Delicately, Lur sought a way into the other's mind, twisting down paths of thought strange to him. Even Varta could not follow the subtle waves sent forth in the quick examination and reconnoitering, nor could she understand all of the conversation which resulted. For the man from the ancient ship answered in speech aloud, sharp, harsh sounds of no meaning. It was only after repeated instruction from Lur that he began to frame his messages in his mind, clumsily and disconnectedly. Pictures of another world, another solar system, began to grow more clear as the spaceman became more at home in the new way of communication. He was one of a race who had come to Erb from beyond the stars, and discovered it a world without human life. So they had established colonies and built great cities, far different from Memphir, and had lived in peace for centuries of their own time. Then, on the faraway planet of their birth, there had begun a great war, a war which brought flaming death to all that world. The survivors of a last battle in outer space had fled to the colonies on Erb, but among this handful were men driven mad by the death of their world, and these had blasted the cities of Erb, saying that their kind must be wiped out. The man they had rescued had turned against one such maddened leader, and had been imprisoned just before an attack upon the largest of the colony's cities. After that, he remembered nothing. Varta stopped trying to follow the conversation. Lur was only explaining now how they had found the spaceman and brought him out of the wrecked ship. No human on Erb, this one had said, and yet were there not her own people, the ones who had built Memphir? And what of the barbarians, who, ruthless and cruel as they seemed by the standards of Memphir, were indeed men? Whence had they come, then, the men of Memphir and the ancestors of the barbarian hordes? Her hands touched the scaled skin of the suit she still wore, and then rubbed across her own smooth flesh. Could one have come from the other? Was she of the blood and heritage of Lur? Not so, Lur's mind, as quick as his flickering tongue, had caught that panic-born thought. You are of the blood of this space wanderer. Men from the river colonies must have escaped to safety. Look at this man. Is he not like the men of Memphir, as they were in the olden days of the city's greatness? The stranger was tall, taller than the men of Memphir, and there was a certain hardness about him which those city-dwellers in ease had never displayed. But Lur must be right. This was a man of her race. She smiled in sudden relief, and he answered that smile. Lur's soft laughter rang in both their heads. Asti, in his infinite wisdom, can see through centuries. Memphir has fallen because of its softness and the evil-doing of its people, and the barbarians will now have their way with the lands of the north. But to me it appears that Asti is not yet done with the pattern he was weaving there. To each of you he granted a second life. Do not disdain the gifts of Asti, daughter of Erb. Again Varta felt the warm tide of blood rise in her cheeks. But she no longer smiled. Instead, she regarded the outlander speculatively. Not even a maiden of the temple could withstand the commands of the All-Highest. Gifts from the hand of Asti dared not be thrown away. Above the puzzlement of the stranger she heard the chuckling of Lur. The End of The Gifts of Asti by Andre Norton. This recording is in the public domain.